Shalom and Maranatha. Welcome to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic channel. Today we're going to look at Joshua chapter 13. There are 33 verses beginning in verse 1. We have the words very advanced in years versus stricken, talking about Joshua being old. So this is a natural phenomena, just being very advanced in years, versus it's described as sort of like a disease or an affliction, being old. So this is a natural phenomena. We all know this. It's pretty common sense, but it's important to point out that difference in particular. Verse 3, we have the word principalities. The 5 principalities of the Philistines versus the 5 lords. Now this term is used for spiritual principalities, but I'm open to the interpretation of it being physical or spiritual, because we do know that behind world leaders, there are spiritual principalities. It's not simply just the human being that is leading whatever country or city or state or region or what have you. Moving on to verse 5, we have a few differences here. It says here, Galiath of the Philistines. This sounds like the Goliath, the giant, perhaps a people called Goliath, but it's interesting that it's called Goliath or Galiath. Maybe it's the name of the land, but it is very close in spelling to Goliath. We know this is hundreds of years before King David was ever born, so it can't be Goliath himself. It must be the name of the land. So perhaps Goliath was named after this land, because maybe he came from there. He was the giant that came from Goliath, perhaps. And he was also a Philistine. And then you have the Giblites in the Masoretic text. Okay, moving on to Gilgal. The place called Gilgal versus Baalgad. So this verse makes an argument for Gilgal being a specific place and not a type of structure. I know there's many opinions about that, but this is perhaps one argument for it being a specific place. Verse 8, we have an omission of from Jordan to the great sea westward, thou shalt give it them. The great sea shall be the boundary. So that's an important aspect of the land, if that's important to you. Big difference in verse 12, or first one. It says here, all the kingdom of Og in the region of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth and in Edrain, he was left of the giants, and Mosheh smote him and destroyed him. So Moses was the one, it was attributed to Moses as being the one who destroyed him. Looks like Og was the one who Moses destroyed. Versus these. So these, talking about multiple giants, but it was only one giant. Og was that last giant, the last of the giants. Very dramatic. Destroyed. So Moses killed him. Moses killed Og, the last of the giants. This is essentially what the Septuagint is saying. The Masoretic is not saying this at all. The Masoretic is saying Moses killed multiple giants. Actually, not killed them. He cast them out. So he evicted them from their land. Told them to get lost. That's not what happened, according to the Septuagint. Verse 13, significant difference. Again, it says here, Israel destroyed not the Gesirite versus expelled not. So again, you see that sort of continuous difference of being destroyed versus being expelled. Two very different things. One is you're ended, your life is no longer in you, and you're simply evicted, you're expelled, you're told to move to another place. Continuing on in verse 13, king of the Gesiri versus the Geshurites. So it's identifying one singular person versus multiple a people themselves. An addition of made by fire, an omission in verse 14 as well of, and this is the division which Mosheh made. So that's interesting. To the children of Israel. Okay. I believe that's talking about the inheritance or not the non-inheritance of the tribe of Levi. This is the division. Okay. Anyhow, that was omitted, and you can look into that as to what was omitted. So it was made to the children of Israel in Araboth Moab, on the other side of Jordan by Jericho. The whole verse is different, so let's look at this. And their borders were from Aroer, which is opposite the brook of Arnon. And theirs is the city that is in the valley of Arnon, and all Misor, the Masoretic, and their coast was from Aroer, that is on the bank of the river Arnon, and the city that is in the midst of the river, and all the plain by Medeba. So that is very different. What else do we have here? An addition in verse 21, which reigned in Heshbon. And then moving on to verse 21, still continuing in 21, Prince of the spoils of Zion. So it's only Rob was the prince of the spoils of Zion versus the dukes of Sihon. So it includes all three dukes of Sihon. Rechem, Zur, and I should say Hor and Reba. Aviv and Hor and Zeba, which were dukes of Sihon. Okay, so anyway, all three were included. We have an omission of, and the inhabitants of Zion versus dwelling in the country. It seems to imply that these dukes mentioned lived in the country rather than simply referring to them as a separate group. Okay. Araba in verse 25. Araba before Arad versus Aroer before Rabbah. So this could be two different places altogether. Most of the first half of verse 27 is different. And Enadam and Othargai and Baanthanaraba. Let's try that again. Baanthanabra and Sokotha and Shaphan and the rest of the kingdom. Okay, so it says, and in the valley, Betharam and Beth Nimrah. So that first part of the verse is very different. If you're really noticing the differences there, they're practically not the same except for the last name there. Okay, and then Enadam versus the valley. I believe it's in the same verse. Where's Enadam versus in the valley? Okay, I don't see it there. Oh, it's right there in Adam. Okay. And then Shan versus Sihon. And then verse 28, I believe it's getting closer to the end. We have an omission. It's a strange description. So it says, according to their families, they will turn their backs before their enemies, because their cities and their villages were according to their families. So that's a strange description. I'm not sure how to explain that, but that was omitted. That description there, talking about Gad. And then verse 33 is the last verse we're looking at. It is a completely added verse to the narrative, talking about Moses giving to the tribe of Levi, did not give them an inheritance, because Yah Elohim of Israel was their inheritance, as he said to them. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for your time. Stay tuned for Joshua chapter 14. Till next time, Shalom and Maranatha. Please like and subscribe to this channel if you like more content like this. Our goal is to finish all of the Tanakh, the Old Testament.